Hi, this is Paul. I've got 3 short videos planned just thinking about Sam Harris and the celebrity atheists a little bit. So one question, does reason stand in for God with the celebrity atheists? The more I listen to them, the more I ponder how they use the word reason and how it's imagined to behave and what it is supposed to deliver upon. And so I decided, well, what if I just made a list of things that where God would normally fit in for a theist, and does this hold true for a celebrity atheist? Reason will bring us peace. Sam Harris talks about the Middle East conflict, and if people would only be reasonable and not be attached to these ancient stories where Abraham bequeaths the land, or there's debate about what's happening, what Islam is deserving. So reason will bring us peace. Reason will bring us unity. If we are only reasonable, we will all see everything one way. Reason will bring us conscious well-being. That's Sam Harris's definition of the good. Reason will save the world. The reason will straighten out everything in the world. Reason will win someday. Reason will make all things new. Now, you can easily replace God for reason here, and the sentences work the same way. And I think in terms of the mental system for the celebrity atheists, God and reason are almost synonymous in terms of how they function. Now, so then I thought, well, let me go a little further. In the Gospel of John, there are some I am statements that are very famous and a little controversial. Well, reason is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to perfection except by her. Now, should I make reason feminine or masculine? I feminized reason, maybe for reasons that will come out a little bit later. Reason is Sophia, wisdom in the Bible and in ancient mythology, was a lady and was a woman. So, maybe if you want to make reason a dude, go right ahead. I won't be offended. Reason is the good shepherd. Reason is the light of the world. Reason is the resurrection and the life. Now, what's interesting in C.S. Lewis's Miracles, I've been rereading it again now lately because it helps keep me oriented in these conversations in terms of some of the observations that Lewis made. The reason Lewis used reason for his take on this had everything to do with the naturalists that he was in conversation with and the naturalism that he evolved beyond in his adult life. And one of the big takeaways from this that I've really lived into is Lewis's observation that the supernatural colonizes nature. And when I listen to, I'm still haven't put a video together yet, but I'm thinking about doing a video on natural and supernatural, because we're using these words, but I'm not quite sure we're knowing what we're talking about. And this idea that Lewis had of colonizing, of the frontier between them, of the ways that reason colonizes nature, how reason colonizes nature to produce water bottles and books and all of these things. That nature is a willing host, a willing guest. Chapter 9 of Miracles, I might do a video just on chapter 9 because it's quite an insightful chapter about how this conversation changes how we see nature. So reason is the hope for the naturalists. Now, what's interesting here is that naturalists worship a God they employ. And I would say worship. Now, they don't go to church and they don't say prayers to it, but worship is more than just formal religious activity. If someone who is in love would say, I worship the ground she walks on. Well, what does that mean? It means that they're sacred, they're special, they function in a higher way within the conversation. And for the celebrity atheists or the career atheists, reason very much fills that gap. And if you just listen to them, listen to how they talk about reason. Now, but here's the thing, they employ reason. Reason is a tool that human beings use. We are admonished repeatedly to be rational, to use reason. Now, what's interesting is that this is a critical error because it means that their agency colonizes reason rather than fully submitting to it. And if you think this thing through, okay, so who is using reason and to what ends? I wouldn't say that I myself am reason. I would say that reason is something I use. Reason is something that I employ. Reason is something that I bring to a conversation. Reason is something that I bring to a task. Reason is something that I bring to a challenge, and I attempt to use it in order to achieve an objective that I want. Now, this walks us right into the big question for this community, which is, what is I? Do I exist? And now in my past videos I've talked about me being a story and all of us being a story, and a story probably being about the best way to represent what we assume a human life to be. Now, there's some real scientific doubt that this can be done, or that this is in any way as clear or as obvious as the language seems to suggest. Jonathan Haidt has a video, or somebody else has a video of Jonathan Haidt out on the internet called The Rationalist Delusion. Someone pointed that out to me very early in this journey. A number of years ago, I read a book by David Eagleman, and one of the points he makes, this is a book for popular consumption, so he tries to simplify the understanding. He says, in a sense, we have our rational faculties and our emotional faculties, but the rational center can do math, but it cannot tell you what to do or what to eat. And he goes into this in the book, and this point has been made by a number of other people, that one of the things that they've learned about our brains, in that there are certain brain disorders that cut off our emotional capacity, and we would imagine that such people become Spock-like, Spock in Star Trek. But that's not the case at all. When this happens and a person's emotional capacity is taken out, what they can no longer do is decide. So in other words, if reason is a tool, if reason is at hand, if reason is something that we employ, it still is colonized by us. Last night at our meetup, I had a conversation. We had a new person come. We had a number of new people come, and it was a delightful meeting. But one of the persons was making the point about a pantheistic conception of the world, and I shared with him my take on pantheism, which is that I don't think it finally works. As long as you have beings that are capable of agency, they just keep colonizing the impersonal. When we walk into, let's say, a virgin field, or what we imagine to be a virgin field or a virgin land, what do we do with it? We shape it according to our desires. We do this all the time. We do it naturally. Agency colonizes the impersonal, and reason in this case is an impersonal tool. It's something that we employ. Math doesn't run us, but we use math to design a bridge, or to design a weapon, or to design a water facility, or to try to design an economy. So without the emotional center, we can never accomplish anything. So how does that really live out? Now remember, Jordan Peterson, I'm reading Maps of Meaning now, and a friend of mine said it was inscrutable. I'm not finding it inscrutable at all. Maybe because I've been listening to Peterson for so long, but it's all of the stuff that I've been soaking in from Jordan Peterson all along. And now at the beginning of Maps of Meaning, as he said in the Easter lectures, you can conceive of reality in terms of two things: a space of objects or a form for action. And I think he's correct in this. I've been saying this for quite a long time in my videos. A form for action is a world of objects is nested within a form for action. And we don't actually see objects, we see opportunities and obstacles. Sam Harris, again, the reality is best conceived as a space for objects. Now for Jordan Peterson, your God or your moral center articulated by stories guides the good you pursue of your action. In other words, you implicitly have telos, you have ends, you have goals, and so you're using reason, you're employing tools that are at hand to achieve an outcome. Sam Harris says, well, you act with reason as your guide. But the problem is, reason isn't really your guide. Reason is the tool you are using to try and arrive at well-being. And so how is reason really a guide? It's more a means to an end. And I think this is why, as I'll do in my other subsequent shorter videos, reason doesn't seem to be able to deliver, well, it doesn't seem to be able to yield outcomes, and this is the fact-value distinction that Peterson keeps bringing up, and he's done a blog post now on his notes from the Sam Harris conversations, that reason can't tell you what is good. Now, reason can offer you a menu of different options, but we are still in the deciding seats. We are still the ones that employ reason. And so I think this is a serious error in the naturalist perspective, at least as articulated by Sam Harris, and to a degree from what I've heard from Matt Dillahunty. The true gods, in Jordan Peterson, are not transparent to you. Your actions express what you truly believe. With Sam Harris, the rationality of your actions is transparent to you. And again, as a depth psychologist, Jordan Peterson has real questions about this, that our motivations are significantly mixed, and in many ways, we don't know, we may not even really know why we're doing something. And someone who is self-conscious and paying attention to themselves probably notices this in themselves. So now, hope and agency. Rationality is a god we employ. And that's, I think, fundamentally, that's how the naturalists see it. Now, they wouldn't say, they would object to the word God. Okay, but rationality is a tool we employ. But it's a tool that gives us power over nature. And I think our hearts want it to give us power over our adversaries, power over those with whom we debate. But we are still doing the choosing, whatever this we is that we feel ourselves to be. And I don't think we can escape that. Religious people who employ their gods are idolaters. And this is a long-running theme in the Bible. And part of why the Lord continues to refer to himself as holy, 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 or sovereign, is that every time a human being tries to employ God, God is offended. Now we find this is just completely common in us as well. I think it has something to do with personality. We would rather be loved than used, and one of the darkest things we can say about another person is that they used me, or they used me against my will. Now, we will often allow ourselves to be used if there are other purposes that we are seeking, but again, we don't like to be tools. We imagine ourselves to be goods in ourselves, and that's, I think, part of the imago Dei, or the image of God. The people who employ their gods are idolaters, and their gods are tools subject to their choices. Now, Christians, and I think other religious groups as well, ideally are servants to their God, and their hope is in his decisions more than their own. And this is a common criticism by atheists, that Christians submit themselves to the will of God. Christians submit to bad things in their lives and derive comfort from imagining that perhaps God has a plan for better outcomes. But this shows the difference between reason as tool and reason as goal. And what I often notice, and I'm actually going to bring these up in the other videos too, rationality and eschatology. We keep waiting for reason to deliver the goods. It isn't much different from waiting for Jesus to come back. How long have we been waiting for reason? Well, I heard Steven Pinker on the Unbelievable podcast talking about reason, and well, reason's making the world better. Okay. Making the world better in what way? According to whom? At almost any point in time, there are ways to stand up and say, well, I think the world is better. There are other aspects you can look at it and say, I think the world is worse. And this again introduces the challenge of subjectivity, because if I'm dying of cancer, painful cancer in a hospital bed, the world doesn't look very good. these assessments, generally speaking, require a vision like what I've talked about before, a monarchical vision that is impersonal. Subjectivity is taken out of the conversation and we assert objectivity, but the only way we can obviously assert objectivity is if we depersonalize it and we imagine our way into it. The difficulty with that, which we all know of each other, is that if I'm imagining objectivity back into the world, how do I know what my biases, motivations are? So when we hear somebody else's imagined objectivity, we protest because we think biases are sneaking in and there's an agenda to this. So if Steven Pinker says the world is getting better, well, maybe I like to hear that because maybe it makes me feel good. Donald Trump in his inaugural address and in a lot of his campaign was saying, well, the world is getting bad and we need to do things. Okay, well, here's the point. Everybody pitches it in the way they want, and this imagined objective view of the world is always pitched by a subject, and so right away we doubt the subject. What is revealed is that we finally hope in ourselves, because this religion of reason is finally a hope in the goodness of humanity, or at least in the goodness of some people, because we only trust in ourselves. But here's where this breaks down. We have trust issues with each other. Often we finally only trust ourselves because that's how we're wired. Or we trust imaginary people we don't know who will make all the right decisions for us, but when it comes to actual people, we have all these trust issues. All the while, we don't trust any other actual human being we are in relationship with. So here's the first of a series of 3 little shorter videos. Just playing around.